Provided that this video comes out in an even remotely recent time span in relation to it, I have recently put together a video about the iconic and beloved game that is Halo 3, discussing why it is that I believe that game to be legendary. Released in 2007, Halo 3 is often considered to be something of a magnum opus, and was pretty much the biggest game on the block at the time of its release. Between frequent updates to its online mode, with new maps for playing and forging, being released and the hundreds of people making videos showing off their love for the game, everyone and their grandma's dogs were talking about and thinking about Halo 3. One major conversation as such would naturally lead people to ask Bungie, what's next? And in 2009, but 2 years after the launch of Halo 3 itself, Bungie responded with the release of Halo 3 ODST, a standalone game that takes the Halo 3 engine and heavily borrows its gameplay to portray its own story in its own way. Where Halo 3 was a bombastic finale to a series known for iconic action movie one-liners, ODST is a slow-paced and sombre game, set in the aftermath of a large fight rather than being the cause of it. While the game at the time was critically acclaimed for the most part, I think that by virtue of it not necessarily being, Halo 4, it led to a lot of disappointment at the time to the game. And this disappointment is frankly a grave injustice, because I'm going to instead stand boldly on my soapbox and screech it to the world that ODST is my personal favourite Halo game.
Get set for a combat drop.
In my previous videos on Halo, I've discussed a few different lore snippets that the game's primarily kept to the background, the different species of the Covenant, the generally messed up origins of the Spartans, and the confusing mess that is the Forerunners. But since those games have been from the perspectives of Chief and Arbiter, you almost always see the universe of Halo through the eyes of two of the most physically powerful people in the galaxy. When you do see the little guys, they're usually either cannon fodder for you to kill, or they're small fry NPCs who are essentially expendable. Throughout the games we have seen a number of Marines, and while we have sometimes interacted with them, they ultimately have a tendency to die on or off screen, and we never need to know anything about who the little guy is, even if they are dressed sharply in the ODST armour. This is a pretty key focus of ODST, paying a lot of attention to who the faceless soldiers fighting the war are, and giving special attention to the front lines and to the horrors of war from a battle that may look somewhat familiar to the keen-eyed among you. Early into Halo 2, Master Chief fought alongside ground forces in the streets of New Mombasa to help protect the city from Regret's attack. During this battle, in low orbit above the city, were a squad of ODSTs, Alpha 9. ODSTs, or Orbital Drop Shock Troopers, get into these little pods that are intended to fly them at high velocities to go from low planetary orbit to being on the ground over a short duration. Think of a real-life spaceship returning to Earth, but it's a one-time disposable pod with a single person inside, like a really high-stakes and over-the-top variation of a paratrooper. And Alpha 9 in particular are a fairly well-respected team of ODSTs, thanks to the leadership of Reach veteran Gunnery Sergeant Edward Buck. In addition to Buck are squad members Corporal Taylor Miles, nicknamed Dutch, Heavy Weapons, Lance Corporal Kojo Agu, nicknamed Romeo, Marksman, Private Michael Crespo, nicknamed Mickey, the worst dude ever, if you know you know, and our player stand-in, the faceless and voiceless Lance Corporal Jonathan Doherty, nicknamed Rookie. Brand new to the squad and loyal to a T, he is seen dozing off while the rest of the squad interact with their new boss, Captain Veronica Dare, from the Office of Naval Intelligence, someone who clearly knows Buck quite intimately. While she seems to imply that Alpha 9 have some sort of secret mission to be going on, the rest of them believe that they're going to be slammed aboard Regret's ship above New Mombasa to save the city. Unfortunately, they are wrong on two accounts, as they're not only not boarding the ship, but Regret, as we know from the events of Halo 2, doesn't plan on sticking around for very long. As Alpha 9 plummet past the ship towards the Earth as all part of the mission, things go drastically awry as Regret jumps into slip space to go check out Delta Halo instead. Many hours later in the dead of night, Rookie awakens in his pod and falls to the streets below. This is where the definition of a level in ODST gets a bit loose. Technically, that cutscene introducing the gang and dropping to Earth was a level, which is similar to how Halo 2 and 3 both had an opening cutscene level, but even more problematic is this level here. Mombasa Streets is, if anything, more of an open world hub world type experience that is used to connect you to the actual levels. A very outlandish comparison would be to view Mombasa Streets as though it were Peach's Castle or Spiral Mountain, or perhaps most apt to Halo would be to view it like the open world featured in Halo Infinite further down the line. You start off in the dark streets with access to just the first level of the game, and upon finishing that level, you are returned to the streets where you have to explore to find the second level, and so on and so forth. It is a veritable actual hub world that simultaneously differentiates ODST massively from the strictly linear games that came beforehand, while also being the tonal powerhouse of the game as a whole. The most famous and beloved part of ODST are entirely vibes based, and those vibes primarily manifest in these dang streets. Rookie alone in the dead of night, searching for his squad with little to no clues to work off of, slowly piecing together step by step the journey everyone else has gone on, fighting, nay, surviving, against the Covenant invasion force. You are not the invincible Master Chief or the invisible Arbiter. You're nobody. At the end of the day, you are essentially a generic, nameless and faceless soldier who is alone in the worst conceivable place for a soldier to be in. It's cold, it's dark, it's lonely, it's raining, everything is destroyed or at least in the process of being destroyed, various fires, a whole city brought to a dead halt after the devastation that regret caused here, with brutes searching for any survivors with the intent of causing further suffering. The tone is bleak, it's hopeless, it's incredibly lonely and isolating in a lot of ways, and those are exactly the vibes that the game sets out to explore. A veritable showcase of the true suffering of war, the emptiness of a dead city. In the background, softly playing, is the sound of sad piano chords, and the low hum of my favourite instrument, the saxophone, playing just what I feel. There is something else though, another aspect of the vibes that is even more unsettling than the generally morose tone may have you believe. The feeling of some sort of spectre watching over you. As you explore the city and inevitably take a wrong turn or indeed dilly-dally for too long, the city itself seems to come alive to direct you on where to actually go. Signs lighting up and posters changing their shape before you to reveal the way to go. This is the city's AI, Virgil, who we are able to learn more about the creation of thanks to a variety of audio logs scattered throughout the city for Rookie to find. The general gist of the logs is that it is a recounting of the evacuation of the city from the perspective of the daughter of the fella that made and implemented Virgil, a girl named Sadie Endesha. Sadie's story may as well honestly be its own piece of media in and of itself, and I recommend checking out the audio logs yourself if nothing else, as they add a whole lot to the world building of New Mombasa and explain a bit about what's going on with Virgil directing you all about the place. In total there are 30 audio logs to find, with 29 of them being in Mombasa streets, and the final one being accessible in one of the last levels of the game, provided you have the other 29 already. We'll talk about that more when we get there. You also get to unlock supply caches scattered around the city as you find the audio logs, something that is admittedly a lot more pertinent to me as I was able to access these caches while I had already found the audio logs and therefore didn't really get to interact with that aspect of the game whilst recording this footage. They contain a variety of things, with each one having SMGs and grenades to play with, as well as being able to find either a sniper rifle, a rocket launcher, or even a mongoose to really help with navigating the city. As the game progresses, Rookie finds out more and more about what happened to his squad, and I will make sure to catch you up on his investigation as and when it's necessary to do so, but we won't spend too much time dwelling on his journey, as I said, the core level-to-level experience of ODST is set in the actual levels, while Rookie's only walks through a primarily vibes-based interim to connect the dots. The first dot of which he finds being Veronica Dare's iconic recon helmet wedged into a flat-screen TV. Upon interacting with it, our first proper level begins as we get a flashback to immediately after the drop through the eyes of Edward Buck.
All I care about now is getting my men out of this city.
Prepare yourselves now for what mayhaps be the most ambitious chapter I have ever attempted in one of my videos, for in this singular chapter I intend to discuss 6 different levels of the Halo 3 ODST campaign: Tayari Plaza, Uplift Reserve, Kazingo Boulevard, Oni Alpha Site, NMPD HQ and Kikawani Station, starting where we left off of course, with Tayari Plaza as seen from the perspective of Edward Buck. This level opens with a brief back and forth between Buck and Dare, establishing more of their history together, both romantic and in many ways disappointing. We learn of them as former lovers whose paths took a different turn once they got to know each other, but with the two of them still having much respect and care for one another, that specifically led to Dare choosing Buck's team for her secret mission because she knows he's good and can be trusted. Unfortunately, her pod doesn't open as readily as Buck's, and so it's up to him to travel through the streets in the middle of the invasion to try and rescue her. It's our first proper look at the city in daylight, which is less iconic to me than the nighttime version, but is still pretty good looking for the time, and gives us a chance to interact with some marines and get to explore flanking routes, which is pretty novel. We also get our first interactions with engineers and hunters. We get to play with a small variety of weapons, and overall the level is pretty short, but I think it's a solid starting point as our first proper level of the game. It's not too dissimilar in its feelings to what we got in Halo 3 proper with Sierra 117, a linear little mission that introduces us to how this game varies from its predecessor with a very easy to follow along with plotline. The mission ends with us approaching Dare's pod only to find her missing. As Buck inspects her missing helmet, a sniper shot is fired at an approaching engineer, and yes, we'll talk about the engineers, but we'll do it in the gameplay chapter. For now, just accept there's a new Covenant race on the block. The engineer is dead, and we see that the shot was fired by none other than Romeo. The engineer, however, explodes, sending Dare's helmet flying through a window to where Rookie found it earlier. After a bit of playful banter between Buck and Romeo, who both suggest getting high up, linking to the BattleNet and trying to find the rest of their squad, assuming for Dare to be dead or at least MIA, their plans turn more so to escape than they do figuring out what her mission was for the time being. With that, we return to the present through the eyes of Rookie. He has pieced together what happened to Dare's helmet and is directed further by Virgil to where he must go next, finding a downed drone that helps him uncover the approximate whereabouts of Dutch, whose pod landed down on a small beachhead just outside of the city. Armed with a Spartan laser of all things, his plan is to stick low to the ground and get back inside the city to rendezvous with his squad. Now, truthfully, the majority of missions in this game could realistically have their story summarized as the squad trying to reunite with one another. The differences tend to boil down to the gameplay within the levels more than the actual story, with the first one as Buck being a pretty typical boots on the ground Halo level, and this one right here being a classic vehicle level like Savo Highway. In fact, much like that level, going fast and ignoring the enemies is pretty much the optimal way to actually play it. There's even an achievement in the Master Chief Collection for finishing it in under 4 minutes, as well as being the most famous level to help with unlocking achievements including finishing any level without firing a single shot, using a single health pack, using a Covenant weapon, or using Visor mode, which is this game's flashlight alternative / improvement. I do try my best in these videos to play the levels what I deem as properly. That means doing my best to actually fight the enemies put in front of me rather than just going fast. Even with regular stops and trying to engage in active firefights with the enemies, this is still a very short level. Other than the big tower falling over partway through in a rather glorious spectacle, not a whole lot happens prior to the end, with Dutch going over a big ramp that lands him squarely in a plaza, just in time to watch an unmanned drone violently crash into a statue behind him and launch the camera that Rookie had interacted with onto the street. As such, we're back in Rookie's eyes as he is once more directed by the city itself to find the next clue in his investigation to reunite with his buddies, this time being a mounted Gauss cannon on the side of a building in and amongst a series of streets that were previously visited by Mickey. Every Halo game has to have at least one tank level, and ODST gets it out of the way nice and early as Mickey fights against the Covenant invasion force with a small squadron of Marines travelling to the titular Kazingo Boulevard. By virtue of being a Scorpion-based level, the general gist of this is that you blow stuff up, and then blow more stuff up, continuing until you reunite with Dutch from the last level. You hold out in this little plaza for a bit, and once every enemy is defeated, the level closes with you destroying a Wraith, and being directed by a police officer to come help out with setting up some explosives. That will be the next level, but before that Rookie of course has to find it, as he ventures through the exact area that Mickey went through, into the plaza and through a tunnel to find the remnants of a bridge overlooking a picturesque flaming ruin, giving a cute little spin to a spent explosive charge, and flashing back to Dutch as he and Mickey plant explosives on the bridge during the day. The two of them set the charges up, retreat across the bridge away from the pursuing Covenant forces, and Dutch gets to climb the tower and flick the detonator, resulting in a rather spectacular light show. Unfortunately, this isn't the only thing the police are looking to blow, as the building this bridge leads to is the facility that stores Virgil. Wanting to keep one of Earth's most useful AI out of the Covenant's hands, they're hoping to get the ODSTs involved in helping blow up the building as well. Besides, the bridge may be out, but the Covenant have flying ships that they drop out of, so it's not like the area is particularly safe anyway. As such, Dutch and Mickey flee into the safety of the building, surrounded by nice and friendly explosive devices, hold out for a while, retreat once more into the elevator, and go to the roof to take out a few more enemies and board a Pelican, with a copper who patches them back through to Buck, ready for the squad to finally reunite as they fly away from the only Alpha site, priming the detonators. Rookie now must begin his search for the police station, the next location the rest of his squad visited, where he finds a horribly bent sniper rifle suspended on a cable overhead. He prods it down with a stick, tries fruitlessly to bend actual metal with his bare hands, and we flash back to get to see Romeo's perspective on what turns out to be our mandatory sniper level. Buck and Romeo were fortunately able to make it to a safe landing spot, wondering where Rookie has wound up. But as the other two arrive in their Pelican to rescue the duo, pursuing Banshees shoot at them and knock them off course. Losing both sight and communication with Dutch and Mickey, Buck relays the order to rescue them to Romeo, and the two set out to travel from one side of the NMPD HQ rooftop to the other. I suppose if any level had to be described as the one that is a bit nondescript and repetitive in its design, I would argue this is up there. It doesn't come close in terms of lackluster level design as either the library or Cortana were, but like in general you just fight your way through a fair few samey looking balconies and rooftop areas for a while, before mercifully getting a really cool set piece that in my opinion is the only thing that saved the level from being completely forgettable. You make your way across a large girder suspended on a crane, connecting the building to the top of a construction site where the Pelican crashed. Banshees flying overhead, sending the whole thing into a state of wibbly-wobbliness as the 4 ODSTs are finally reunited in the same place at the same time. And then you get a perhaps slightly too long sequence where you hold your ground against seemingly unending waves of Banshees and dropships, waiting for a chance to evacuate. Before such a chance can arise, a brute chieftain drops down from his phantom and catches Romeo off guard, getting in a heavy swing with his gravity hammer to critically wound the sharpshooter, bending his rifle in half and sending it careening down to the ground level for Rookie to find later, with everyone else ganging up on the brute to take him down in rather dramatic fashion. With the Pelican shot down and Romeo being only barely capable of standing, Buck makes the executive order to begin evacuation through underground tunnels beneath the city to make their way to the main point of evacuation used by civilians, Kikawani Station, the same train station that Sadie left the city from in her audio logs, and the next destination for Rookie to investigate. With that prior level taking place during sunset, the timeline between Rookie and the rest of the squad's day is getting ever closer, with him only being about an hour behind the time they make their way into the train station, tossing aside a canister of medicinal goop that was used to stabilize Romeo's injury. Unfortunately, Rookie did not make it back to his team in time and is left alone in the city as they plan their escape. They too are met with misfortune, however, as the train station is heavily flooded and the trains are all inoperable. With no way to leave through the train tunnels, a new plan is quickly hatched where they notice a parked Phantom just up ahead. A plan to hijack that Phantom and fly on out of there together. You, the player, do not get to fly the Phantom. Instead, this job is reserved for your 3 squad mates to fly it, and man the side turrets while Buck flies a Banshee around to help clear the skies and anything that may shoot the Phantom down. This includes fighting various fuel rod wielding grunts, some AA wraiths, opening up doors so that the squad may go through, with a small on-foot segment fighting in a dark corridor with pitiful weaponry, and even eventually having to go head to head with the Scarab. Fortunately, landing up top with the Banshee, or shooting its legs if you're so inclined, makes the Scarab honestly pretty easy work, and leads to the explosive finishes to destroy these sort of nestings being used to recharge the engineers as the 4 lads fly out of the city into the night sky, ready to live another day free from the dangers of New Mombasa. Though there is still something on Buck's mind, one more loose end than he finally realizes the answer to. Dare's mission. He orders for Mickey to turn the Phantom around, ready to mount a daring rescue mission in the tunnels beneath the city. Rookie, on the other hand, gets a more direct message, as he hears Dare set a distress call over the radio, springing into action to finally reunite with someone, hopefully, as the game approaches its final 2 levels.
Now's one of those times. Pays to be the strong, silent type.
Having now covered the overwhelming majority of the levels story-wise in Halo 3 ODST, I should hope that the general feeling of loneliness in those Rookie night exploration segments is made somewhat clear, and the storyline of the rest of the squad reuniting and finally going to complete their mission has been covered well enough. As far as the plot goes, we are covered for now, but as always I feel I should devote some time to the gameplay, and on this occasion I feel I'm in a fair bit of luck. The name of this video game is Halo 3 ODST. Halo 3. While in my opinion it's pretty unarguably its own thing with its own plot and even some of its own gameplay, it is still very much heavily derived from the baseline of Halo 3's engine and gameplay. Any weapon that appears in both games is more or less fundamentally identical, with only 5 weapons being cut between the games, as both the iconic battle rifle and the even more iconic energy sword are both completely absent in every way. Additionally, the Magnum has been replaced with a silenced Magnum, the SMG replaced with a silenced SMG, and the plasma rifle replaced with a variation on the original Halo 2 Brute plasma rifle, conceptually similar but different weapons in execution. Meanwhile, every other weapon from Halo 3, the assault rifle, shotgun, frag grenade, sniper rifle, rocket launcher, Spartan laser, machine gun, missile pod, flamethrower, plasma pistol, needler, carbine, plasma grenade, beam rifle, fuel rod, plasma cannon, spiker, mauler, gravity hammer, spike grenade and firebomb, all return and are functionally identical. I'm sure there's minute differences people will get upset at me for not mentioning, but if you really want to know what these guys do, I would suggest seeing what I said about them in the main Halo 3 video. Oh, and for what it's worth, every vehicle except the Hornet and Prowler also return, though you aren't able to pilot a Wraith at any point as they only appear as enemies. In terms of the new stuff, well, this is pretty much the best Halo pistol since the first Halo pistol, and the competition wasn't exactly stiff, mind, but this for once actually packs a pretty tremendous punch. The same can be said of the SMG, which is not only considerably better than its unsilenced brother was, but is honestly probably the best automatic weapon in the game, barring vehicles and turrets. The plasma rifle is still a bit While it's still not great, but having a faster fire rate comparable to the original brute plasma rifle is still a marked improvement over the Halo 3 version. There is a small caveat however, insofar that all these weapons, and indeed other weaponry like the plasma pistol, spiker and mauler, can no longer be dual wielded. Akimbo weaponry is gone entirely, and not just for ODST, but for Halo as a whole going forwards. On the one hand, I do believe that the dual wielding mechanic is specifically what led to the Magnum's fall from grace, and why a weapon like the SMG could never really shine. On the other hand, 2 guns is objectively twice as cool as 1 gun, and not having that luxury anymore stings from a cool factor perspective. In terms of this game specifically however, I'm actually all for it. Helps to separate the comparatively scrawny ODSTs from the monster of a man that Chief is. It's a shame, but a necessary one for the sake of the game, and it admittedly resulted in some pretty good weapons overall. In terms of the enemies, well once again the changes between 3 and ODST are staggeringly few. There are still no elite enemies, the only ones you'll ever find are dead before you get there, presumably either by the hands of humans or from the brutes getting some sneaky betrayals in there on Truth's orders. This means you're stuck with the little grunts, the shielded jackals, the sniper jackals, the flying drones, the hulking brutes, the monstrous hunters and, for the first time, no flood or sentinel enemies. The engineers however do serve a gameplay purpose, and a rather interesting one at that. Sometimes enemies glow, and when they do this, they are extremely resilient to all incoming damage and are obnoxious and time consuming to eliminate. But if you look to the skies above the glowing enemies, you will oftentimes find an engineer floating around and, upon its demise, the shields on the enemies will disappear. It's a fairly unique enemy for Halo, designating itself specifically as priority number 1, and making fights considerably harder when not dealt with, while itself not dealing any actual damage in any way unless you happen to be near it when it dies and subsequently explodes. I like the implementation of the engineers, and the story logic of them serving as a final piece of an invasion force cementing their reign over a territory helps to somewhat explain what they haven't been seen before, because Chief never really fought Covenant who were dug in a city they were invading. Arguably the biggest change however is the change from shields to being based on stamina, which at the end of the day is basically just the old Combat Evolved system of managing health again, where you now have a depleting health bar that can only be restored through health packs, and this only takes damage when you're out of stamina, much like shields, but slower to recharge and with more panting. Plus the flashlight is no more, replaced with visor mode, which puts a really cool outline around everything and has a lot of cool visual identity to this game's style and the feel of being an ODST trooper on a cool night raid. When playing those dark missions it can actually be really immersive as well as useful to flick the mode and navigate via highlights. It's not like anyone used the flashlight anyway, so this is another very welcome change. Overall, in spite of a few weapon changes, emissions, stamina, visor and the new engineers to play with, like I said, it's just Halo 3's gameplay with a new coat of paint, which is by no means a bad thing because Halo 3's gameplay was already really fun. So this game is really fun.
This is Captain Veronica Dare. My beacon is active. Need immediate assistance.
As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by myself, Buck had the realization as to Dare's whereabouts in the city are more or less the same time that Rookie was told directly by Dare as to Dare's whereabouts in the city. With this, finally the squad is set to reunite and fly off into the sunset together, except of course that Dare is in a series of subterranean tunnels that cover the city by being the means to which Virgil interacts with the city, and with her broadcast seemingly being picked up by the Covenant, means that everyone left in the city is basically converging on this one final location, with Rookie having to fight his way down through the tunnels to find her. You also find this police officer in this level, something that is directly tied to finding the aforementioned 30th and final audio log about Sadie. He sticks with you for a bit, serving as an invincible ally who sort of helps you shoot the baddies before you eventually find what he's looking for. Normally I like to talk through every aspect of a game's story, but since I didn't spend time talking about the Sadie stuff, I will for once show some restraint and not explain what happens with this guy or how Sadie's story ends. Just know that by following him, in spite of his instructions not to do so, you find the final audio log and continue the rest of the mission to find Dare on your lonesome. And find Dare you do, as Rookie bumps into her after several floors of traversal in a rather samey looking level, just before, as Buck sort of implied in his revelation, a large nest of drones. Impressed with Rookie's survival, Dare believes that the two of them have much better odds of making it through the centre of the hive than she had alone, causing her to fully commit to the plan of literally just running through the middle of all the drones, waking them up bit by bit as they cross the catwalks and towards this level's namesake, the Data Hive, the core at the heart of the city beneath the building that Dutch and Mickey destroyed, and the home of Virgil. A home, it turns out, that has had an unexpected visitor. Unexpected to Rookie at least, as Dare seems to have known all along that an engineer managed to escape from Kikowani Station and find its way here, combining its own biomechanical nature with Virgil, and has been manipulating the city piece by piece to ensure that Rookie could reunite with his team and save it. An engineer that has itself become Virgil, an asset for the war that serves simultaneously now as one of the most powerful AI the UNSC have at their disposal, and a little alien dude who knows a thing or two about the Covenant's plans. Hence Dare's mission to come down here and extract the new Virgil, which is when a new challenger enters the hive, as Buck makes his grand appearance in time to help provide extra covering fire as Rookie, Dare and Virgil escape from the AI core, and the four of them prepare to finally leave New Mombasa together.
We need to move, now.
Buck has handily had the Phantom parked a distance along the coastal highway that runs alongside the city, providing a perfect escape plan for the crew to drive along the road in the early morning sun and fully reunite and escape with Virgil. Unfortunately, they first need to make it to the highway, and from a story perspective this just means taking one final stroll through a plaza in the city, but from a gameplay perspective this means keeping Virgil alive. Despite Virgil being an engineer, a species that has thus far proven itself to be incredibly fragile. It's not as annoying as it sounds though, but it is certainly something to keep in mind that you probably should make sure to beat every enemy before moving ahead, as Virgil will need to open up a door that you have to go through to get to the highway proper. Virgil starts up a vehicle called an Oliphant, which is a variant of Halo 3's Elephant, designed for, bins. It's a garbage truck, and he shields it to keep it safe while Dare drives the two across the bridge, though not before she and Buck chat things out, make out to signify that everything's seemingly good between them, and Buck says the darndest thing.
Take my advice, Rookie. You ever fall for a woman?
Make sure she's got balls.
What? So yeah, this is another driving level, and it's kinda like the equivalent of a Warthog run in that you are driving a Warthog for the majority of it, going from one end of the highway to the other. But an important distinction is that you do have to protect the Elephant on its journey, or else Virgil dies and, well, that's mission failed, you'll get him next time. Rookie drives, Buck shoots, and unlike the classic Warthog runs you go at a pretty slow pace, because it's a protection mission. In co-op this is great fun as you get infinite ammo rocket launchers and such, but solo, Buck is very stress-inducing as his shooting is lackluster at best and frustrating at worst. And if you try to swap positions with him and try to shoot, then his driving isn't much better, overall making the whole thing a real test of patience, at least until you get to swap over to a Gauss Hog where Buck fares considerably better. Not to mention the Scorpion, which I suppose disqualifies this from being a real Warthog run, but that doesn't matter because the level doesn't even end once you get out of the vehicle. You have a whole section where you and Buck have to protect a building that Dare and Virgil are hiding in as Covenant forces drop off to try and stop you from leaving the city while you wait for the Phantom boys to come pick you up. It's a relatively long firefight with a decent variety of enemies, but it is surprisingly over before you might expect, with the lads finally returning in time to rescue Rookie, Buck, Dare and Virgil, and the seven of them leave the city together, flying into a new day as the camera pans out to reveal the excavation site just outside of the city, taking shape as the game concludes and fades to black. The final cutscene of the game plays out with the squad in an orbital-only facility, with Virgil, as none other than Johnson himself arrives to inspect the success of their mission, congratulate the squad, and begin to probe the engineer for information on the Covenant, lighting up a cigar next to the highly flammable creature, serving as our actual true ending, fading out as Virgil presumably goes on to tell Johnson all about Truth's plans regarding the dig site and the Ark, information that became very useful for Chief in the future.
Firefight.
Halo Combat Evolved had a classic and simply enjoyable multiplayer mode that has aged relatively graciously, albeit definitely aged. Halo 2's multiplayer is a huge step up, but is populated primarily by people who are considerably better than I am. Halo 3 presented a much more even playing ground for me, and is additionally considerably more populous than its predecessors. So what, pray tell, could ODST do to add to the multiplayer formula that Halo 3 has thus far perfected, especially considering that the game derives itself from Halo 3's engine and gameplay so directly already? Well, it does so by not having any multiplayer to speak of. The original ODST disc for the Xbox 360 came with a secondary disc that allowed you to boot directly into Halo 3's multiplayer with all DLC included, without having to purchase separately, which was a nice bonus for sure, but the actual intended online multiplayer mode for ODST itself is considerably more interesting, being rooted directly inside the gameplay that I personally love more about Halo, the PvE or player versus enemy experiences. Rather than fighting against other players who are considerably more competent than I am, the Firefight mode has you team up with other players soldiers who are considerably more competent than I am, so that you may fight off various waves of incoming Covenant forces much akin to the various times this happens in the campaigns, including the finale of Coastal Highway for example. Each map is based directly off of a location featured in the campaign, like the bottom of the elevator from Only Alpha Site, the scaffolding area from NMPD HQ, and again Coastal Highway. The Master Chief Collection takes it a step further by adding flood enemies to the equation, which certainly adds a lot to the game mode. It's honestly really good fun, especially with friends, and with various difficulties to choose from, surviving as long as you possibly can is honestly quite fun. Plus you get to play as every member of Alpha 9 if you want to, getting to play as Rookie, Buck, Dutch, Romeo, Mickey, and even Dare, who you didn't actually get to play as in the campaign. Originally as a pre-order bonus for the game, and readily available in the Master Chief Collection by grinding their level systems, you can even play Firefighters Sergeant Avery Johnson himself. There's no gameplay difference between playing as any different character other than the voice lines you get, so if you want to listen to his buttery sweet motivational dialogue, you are certainly able to do so in the excellent Firefight mode. So yeah, that's about everything I really have to say regarding Halo 3 ODST. As I said, it's probably my favourite Halo game of all time, at least on a vibes basis alone, because the feel of this game and the atmosphere it commands is second to none. The story is pretty simplistic and the gameplay is just more something that was already really good, but these aren't necessarily detractors in this instance because I don't think this game ever set itself out to be anything more than just an excuse for more Halo 3 on a smaller scale. This game released less than a year after a separate Halo spin-off game, Halo Wars, which itself was an ambitious console-exclusive real-time strategy game in the vein of StarCraft or Command & Conquer. I don't like this game very much because I don't very much enjoy that style of game, power to you if you do, I've just never really been able to get into them or devote the time to really understand them, which makes ODST a more appealing game because I know in my heart of hearts that I already really enjoy first-person shooters, and as I hope my interest in both Mass Effect and Hotline Miami have thus far proven, I also enjoy a bit of introspective and deep storytelling that makes you ponder and gives you time to just breathe it all in. So ODST is a match made in heaven. It's slow, solemn, solitary, steadfast and sombre. It's morose and melancholic, downcast and despairing, lugubrious and lachrymose, and above all else it's good. There's just something about ODST, be it the music or the simplicity or the acceptance the division was truly met in the creation of this masterpiece. The game just adds together to me to just be a genuinely enjoyable experience from start to finish, with perhaps the most unique gameplay of a mainline Halo game thus far. It feels like a game that would be a beautiful swan song for Bungie, were it not for the fact that their actual Halo swan song was the game to follow, Halo Reach. A game I look very much forward to talking about, as despite a few controversies regarding certain mechanics and story elements, it's the one that I played the most when I was younger, and the one I have the fondest memories towards. Next time we tackle Halo, we do it for her. Yo, the ODSTs are coming to Helldivers.